Welcome everyone. Let's first item on the agenda. Let's welcome our two new members from the CCAP, Tony Joya and Scott Barnhart.
Hey guys. Welcome aboard.
Condolences.
Yeah, good luck. Yeah.
And the chair buys drinks after all the meetings.
And also our new recorder and assistant to Bethany. Welcome to our group. She is now a permanent employee of the building and will be supporting us for our meeting. So welcome. All right. So let me start off by reading the purpose statement. The primary objective of the CAC is to ensure the capital maintenance and public transportation projects and programs approved by the voters during November 2nd, 2004, and November 6th, 2012 elections are accomplished with PPRTA funds. This committee reports directly to the Board of Directors. Having done that for reasons I don't already know. Do I hear all of the alternate members can vote today? So do I hear a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion.
Yes.
Second.
Second, John. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Call for public comment for items not on the agenda. Anybody in the audience for public comment? Any members of the committee? Beth?
We had the privilege of watching them set the arches over Chestnut Creek. Some of us have been also had the privilege of watching them set the girders on Baptist. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? We watched them set the arches over the Chestnut Creek Bridge. It was really interesting. It's a different type of pick. To me, it's interesting because of the work, and I also learned how some things have changed. We got to see Baptist Road, and if anybody wants, I have half a dozen pictures on here of the actual procedure, but it took, I want to say, about 45 minutes to pick one off the truck and set it in place. And the biggest portion of the time was the guys trying to scoot it over.
Yeah, and I'll just piggyback on that. I talked to Travis in Public Works, and he's going to try to keep us more involved and informed of those kinds of projects for those types of things to afford us the opportunity to see some of the work that's being done with our funds. And so hopefully that won't be the only invitation we get. So if you get those, please avail yourself if you can do so. Mike?
We wanted to reiterate that if you guys like that, guys and gals like that, we definitely like to have those opportunities. And so we will invite you when there's things come up, but if you have a project that you know of and want to tours look at it, you can also contact me and we'll set it up. Appreciate all of you.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, I hear a motion for approval of minutes of the August 3rd meeting.
So moved.
Second. Second, was who? Oh, Jean. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, financial reports, Ms. Bev. No.
Okay, good afternoon. So in June, we received $8,752,000, which was almost $600,000 over the budget. So that is quite large, or 7.3% for that month, and we're over the amended budget. So this is the new amended budget figure in here, that $89 million. And so we're over the budget $1.879 million, or 4.5%. So just really going along well. And then on the second page, we're $2.8 million ahead of last year, or 6.8%. Now, does anybody have any more questions on these financials? I don't really go through the other ones page by page unless
Are you going to maintain this excellent effort of collecting extra money?
Well, we can only hope, but I got a letter from the Department of Revenue saying that we're going to have like a $350,000 charge against our account for a wireless tax that shouldn't have been collected through a particular company. And so there was a little class action suit against the company for collecting the tax. And then after they won the class action suit, the Department of Revenue had to go back and figure out how much of it was on that particular kind of service. And we'll be refunding that money probably, maybe this month, but in the next month against that. But we'll see. I'll keep my eye open for it and let you know when it's refunded, so.
I do have a couple of questions. On page 3, the initial A-list project, down in the city of Colorado Springs, the roadway safety traffic ops, it appears as though they've only spent about $7,000 and of the $2.5 million, $2.4 million. And that's on the initial list. Am I reading that correctly?
Yes, they code invoices to what accounts they want them to go to. And if let's find that item in the next.
Then on page 6, it looks like if there's $9 million done, is that they've expended?
Yeah, that's to date, from the beginning, inception of the RTA to date, yeah.
So,
On page 3, that's the annual budget. See what I'm saying? Then the other page, did you say 7 or 6 or
I
7?
guess my question may be more directed towards Mike, but shouldn't we, almost a year into the new thing, have expended, particularly for these kinds of funds, shouldn't we have expended most of the old money by now?
I'll have to get back with you, and I'll have to get with Kathleen, because that fund sometimes has some projects that are lagging a bit, so I can let you know next month or for the board meeting.
I just, I know there's a lag between the reporting that we see and Bev's sheet based on invoice lag and flow of those. But when I look down the initial A-list projects and I see projects with 0% spent of their annual budget and they're still in the the initial A-list, it kind of makes me wonder, what are you doing with the money?
Yeah, let me get you an update on that one.
All right. Thank you. Any other questions for Bev?
Yeah. Brett, your same thing. Is that part of the 4.8 million?
No, that's not part of the pool. Is that your question?
Yeah, basically, the whole total project is like $2.4 million, and it's with the carryover.
That's their annual for that, but I'm not sure what year annual that was.
Well, and this is the end, so that number will only change if they spend against it. Well,
Or move money into it or something.
yeah, or move money out, like a line item transfer. So it's possible that they're going to line item transfer out of that. If they don't need that for that project, they could line item transfer it somewhere else. But, I mean, Mike's going to check with Kathleen. I don't know. Now, the items that have negative numbers in the actual, like County Line Road, those are usually cost share, or like if we had a retainage that wasn't necessary anymore after the project's done, that type of thing.
Any other questions on financials? Thank you, Beth.
Okay.
Okay, that's on the monthly reports. You want to talk about the budget calendar?
Right. So the next item is the draft budget calendar, which I'm looking for recommendation for approval on this, and it's very similar to last year's, and it satisfies all the requirements, legal requirements of the state of Colorado, and just outlines when we're going to be presenting these items to the CAC and the board, and then approval at the December meeting and having the public hearing at that time. So then along with this item, I handed out an estimate for revenue next year. And I'm just going to ask that we increase revenue from the 89 million and add 2 million to 91 million. So we can always add more at the amendment time mid-year. So I think that's probably a pretty good number.
Is it possible to reach a number where we no longer have contractors available to do the work?
Getting close.
All right.
Okay. So I'm looking for a motion to recommend these two things to the board for approval.
So moved.
I have a question.
Oh, okay, sorry.
On item 6, or line 6, where we hold a budget workshop, is that going to be in conjunction with the CAC meeting, or is that going to be a separate one?
That's the CAC meeting date. Yeah.
And that's where we hear from each of the member entities and their descriptions of it. Okay.
Yes.
We're talking about the one on 11-2.
Right.
Yes. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Gene?
Well, the budget calendar and then this revenue estimate. Now, sometimes I don't even give this to the CAC, I just ask the board, but I thought since I had it ready for today's CAC meeting, and we have to go forward to the member governments to start the budget process, so I won't have another meeting with the CAC before we have to be working with these figures.
Okay, so this is all one item. It's part of the calendar. So, budget calendar. Correct, yes. Any other questions? All those in favor of the recommendation to the board, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item 5C, capital renewal project revisions.
Okay, so last month at the CAC meeting, you all went over this item and continued it on to this meeting, where we're looking for a process for the member governments to get approval to increase their overall project budgets, which it can happen through the annual budget, but it could be that they need more over time than what you approve through the annual budget, because the annual budget ties it out to the funds that are available. So we're just today hoping to continue that conversation and come up with a process. So I'll leave that to you.
All right, let me, if I may, after our meeting last month, I had a talk with Jennifer and Kathleen, and our discussion centered around when is the most appropriate time to update the project cost numbers that were approved on, or that were in this PPRTA 2 list. We know that those dollar values are wrong, or they're not correct. So the question to them was, when do they begin to look at these projects and actually start updating their project numbers? It makes no sense to try to come up with an updated number for a project that's 4 or 5 years away when we know it's going to change again. And so what is a reasonable request in a period of time? And the answer from both, and I have not spoken with the smaller governments, but I'm assuming that it's pretty close to the same. They really don't worry about that stuff until they're either doing their budget formulation for the next fiscal year, or they're in year of execution and they're ready to start putting out on a bid or getting ready, and they're going from that 10% design to either 30 or 90. So they make that jump from 10 to 30, and then the next jump is 90% design to put it out on the street for an RFP. So trying to be sensitive to the workload of the already stressed staffs,
my thought was that we need to try to get them to update it in their budget request if they can, if they have a number where they've gone, maybe some stuff in the near part of the fiscal year, the new fiscal year, they've already moved to that 30%, number or whatever. And that we not try to request an overall update of the entire list, that we limit it to budget year if you've got it. If not, when you get ready to execute, then you bring those requests forward. And this is with the understanding, from my perspective, and I'm throwing it out to you, is that any price increases have got to be absorbed within your budget allocation or your allotted funds, unless there's a large project like, say, Mark Sheffel or Colorado Boulevard, where it's a joint project, then the board may decide to dig into the reserve, or the coffers a little bit and award without making someone absorb a huge amount for a joint multi-governmental project. So does that spur conversation, and you guys okay with that part of it? Because there's another piece of this that I want to bring up. So
I do have a question. You said, especially for stuff that's 4 or 5 years out, trying to do those estimates now is absurd because it's going to change between now and then. For the ones that are that far out, with the known increases so far, wouldn't it still make sense to just at least have an estimate of what the increases have been, just so we can kind of keep track further down the road of what we're going to be needing at that point? Or is, and again, first meeting, I don't know. So.
And that was originally part of the conversation, is what good, I mean, we're really not looking at it.
Sure.
We don't necessarily know in what year the governments have got them petitioned off. And so my question would be is if they've got it and they want to update it, fine, but I'm not sure what value it has in the overall decision-making and review, because we tend to focus on budget year related things and execution year, and not so much the out year numbers. And so that was kind of the basis of my comment.
75% previous projects.
So does that make sense that we do that? All right. So the next issue that we had some proposals, and so I put together some thoughts here on some slides here to Bethany, if you want me to. Got the little mouse, I can go over here. Is when we're coming in, thank you, coming in with project cost increases, how do we handle it? So, what's driving the cost increases, and then how much detail do we need in order to formulate a recommendation to the board when these price increases come in? Keep in mind that the project descriptions on the ballot were just one-liners like widen Woodman Road. And we don't really know what that means, and we're not sure what the public really meant, other than they expect to see Woodman Road widened. They're not sure whether it's going to 3 lanes with a center turn lane, 4 lanes, or a 6-lane highway. So the first time we really see, there are some exceptions, but for the most part, the first time we really ever see any detailed descriptions or any details about a project is when they submit their budget. And they've got a page description of what they're planning to do and the detailed work. Other than that, it's just a name and a number on a piece of paper, from our perspective. And so when they bring in an increase, what's driving that increase? Is it a scope creep? Is it something that that's beyond their control that may be doing that? So I think it's important that when we start formulating this, that we have an understanding of what's driving those cost changes, and then we've got the job of trying to interpret what did the public really mean when they approved those projects. So, if a project cost has changed and gone up, or something has changed, what's driving it? There's changes in federal laws. I mean, these things were put together. Some of them, as we found out with the pedestrian bridge, have been on a master plan for years. And so the cost estimates put together in 2012 or so. So what's driving it? Was it a change in federal law? Was it some kind of environmental where you've changed to now change a bridge from a 100-year flood event to a 150-year flood event? Land uses, master plans, take Banning Lewis Ranch. It's changed in scope in terms of what's going to be built out there at least 3 or 4 times in the 12 years I've been in town. So I think it's important for us to know what's driving those changes, and maybe it's just an engineering change or something. But so the other thing, back to the pricing, was that these costs were established in 2012 or sometimes before, and as I mentioned, they were at 10% at best, and some of them are swags. They're just wild-ass guesses that were based on similar projects done somewhere else, and they put it on the ballot with an idea of what they would get to down. And so then I've already repeated those other things about the milestones and the extra cost in project designs. So I think, and this is all my point of view for discussion within the group, that when we're faced with large project increases, we need to know what's driving those in order to formulate a recommendation to the board. And but we need to balance that with our level of detail with respect to the staffs, and we so inflation's running. We've had this discussion that's been running 15 to 20% depending on whether it's labor and materials. We've seen those requests come in from time to time. So I threw up 3 things up there to being respectful of the staff as to how much detail do we really need in order to provide it. We've got people coming in here that want to make a change and need to get a project. We don't have enough detail and they've got to come back. So let's lay some guidelines out during budget formulation period that says if you've got an increase in this margin, and I just threw some numbers out there, if inflation is running about 20%, if it's 20% or lower, we just need a good written description in the memo that we get them of what that was. It's labor and material increase, or we had to change suppliers. You guys were aware of the chip seal issue this year, that the cost just was absorbent because it wasn't available. So we just need something like that. And then I threw in a mid-range from 10 to 40%. We need a little more detail. We need some specifics now that describing the change exactly. We designed it, we figured out we missed something, or federal laws have changed, we now got to put this in, whatever thing, what caused it, but we need a little more detail. And if it's greater than 40%, we need a presentation on it. We need to understand the details. Was it drawings, just exactly what it was, and again, discussion about what caused it and why. So I just threw those out there. If for discussion, whether you think it's a good idea, a bad idea, but I'll leave them, I'll throw them out there and see what you guys think, and change the numbers, change it to 2 levels, whatever.
Well, just a question, if it is greater than 40%, do we care, or do we need to know about how that's going to be absorbed with their whole plan? Because obviously it's going to affect other projects, right?
Well, oops, I'm sorry. In my, again, I changed my slide. The caveat here on that bottom slide is that with the exception that the board might make, it's up to them, and they've got to prioritize those projects. And if something falls off the bottom of the list, you got to wait until mid-year and see how much additional money you might get in a mid-year adjustment, and then you can bring it back on the list, or you may have to push it out year. So, Tony?
Quick question. The estimates that came in 2012, were they all based on 2012 prices, or were they based on when we think we're going to get it done and what we expect for inflation in that time period?
I can't answer that, Mike.
Mike Chavis, City Engineering. No, those were kind of cost estimates at the time.
So if it had been done in 2012, that's what it would have cost approximately?
Approximately, but again, as Jim mentioned, some were just very swag. Actually, case in point, the Chestnut Bridge, we actually had a engineering firm look at a couple of different options to replace that culvert on Chestnut, and they came up with a number, the 1.8, and we thought that's a good estimate, good, preliminary. But when we got into the actual design, just some of the things, the constructability wasn't looked at, and they weren't charged to. We just wanted something close. But the constructability aspect of it drove that cost quite a bit. So even when we try to get a good number, when you get to final design, it changes. It can change. We've had other projects where we've done a 10, 15%, and Austin Bluffs Union way back when, we did some work up ahead and came up with a $30 million budget, and we were pretty close to that. So one of the things that you'd mentioned, and I think what I would like to do on at least the city side is I do want to go through the list of projects, because we do lay those out. We kind of have them out, scheduled out roughly based on, just kind of what we think we'll have every year. I think we need, or I want to look at our projects, make sure the scoping is better dialed in, because that changed those project budgets, and I think it would be really tough to do it on a year-to-year. I think it would be easier and better planning if we kind of look ahead, because what's going to more than likely happen is we can get everything done, but right now I think the county and the city have everything set to finish the A-list in 7 years. And that's not going to happen. I think it's going to be some of the stuff pushed out a year or so. So I would like to go through an exercise, at least on our side, to see our scopes. That way, we have a better dialed-in number. When we actually get to the design of that project in 4 years, we still may come back and say, hey, inflation's been hitting us, and we still need more money. But I'd rather be coming back for 20% or less, because we dial into the scope, rather than wait and 4 years, we say, hey, this was so out of the ballpark. We didn't touch it from day one. Now I need, 50, 60% more. So that's something I was planning on doing.
I certainly personally don't have a problem with that. I think that's prudent, but I was just trying to be, respectful in terms of direction that that the board might give you. Is I was sensitive to doing exercises that when you get it, you go like, well, so what? If it does you good, that's fine.
Well, and this is something we did in RTA 1. Yeah. We were all looking, and especially when the inflation hit, we started having to look and project out more. And then we got a reprieve because in a way, we got a reprieve because the economy tanked. ARA supplemented the loss of money, and we had better pricing. So, and I don't wish that this round. I'd rather struggle. I don't want a downturn. But anyway.
I have a question for both of you. Okay. If I understood it, Jim's recommending only that you give, you're going to have to do it anyway. You want to come and ask the board, and you can expect, because of the percentages, you can expect, for the sake of discussion, $5 million next year. Now you've got to figure out, with that $5 million, where you're going to spend it. I'm picking numbers just the same as Jim.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see that that's unreasonable. You're putting that budget, and I'm trying to read something into Jim's statement is, give us the scope, what that $5 million is being spent for. It's $1 million for this project, $500,000 for this, whatever it is. And
Green Mountain Falls guy, right?
Well, and we will have to do that, but I'd like to look down further and at least prep you guys that.
You're saying for 18's budget as well?
Well, just the whole thing, just make sure, because like the question, widening Woodman, we had an idea we're going from 4 to 6 lanes. Put a number of that, that's easy enough, but some of these projects, they weren't looked at enough to say, hey, in order to do that widening, which you can get a pretty hard cost of that, there's all these utilities, there's this, that, there's wetland mitigation. Well, if we don't look at that a little bit more in depth and at least throw some numbers to that, that's where we're getting caught. So I want to go through our projects and just make sure we, it's going to be cursory, but a little bit more, and just make sure that, because the scopes, widening Woodman, that's pretty wide open. And
I'm still having trouble.
Well,
and what does that mean? What's it going to take? And that's the thing is you can say we're going to widen it, but what does it really take to widen it? And that wasn't looked at always in any kind of detail. And I think we need to look at it a little bit just so we can say, hey, we really need more money. For a project 5 years out, we're going to need $5 million more as, you know, from today's dollars now, plus whatever, you know, the actual inflation. So I'd rather have, you know, better numbers so that we see how much money do we need at the end, and what does that do to the schedule
Right.
and finishing the
And
list.
and that's important, the long-range aspect of where you're going to be. And then an ancillary question would be is that when you come in with the budget year request for a project, if it's a multi-year project, are you requesting total funding in 1 year, or are you requesting the money you think you need just for that fiscal year?
We kind of look at, if it's stretched over 1 or 2 or 3 years, we kind of look at, we can dedicate this much money this year for this, plus all the other stuff we want.
Right.
And then we figure out what we need the following year.
Right, okay.
So,
Because I was getting ready to say, if you've got a large project and you have a prioritization issue because you've got increases, you don't need all the funding for that project in 1 year if it's going to be executed over multiple years.
yes,
You just got to remember to dedicate that money in future budgets.
yes.
Right. Okay. Gene?
A couple of comments, Jim. I think that your initial approach on trying to balance the workload for the member governments and whatnot, I think is a good approach. This level of detail, I'm generally in favor of it. I wish I could make 20% on my investments, or better. But the one thing that I see is missing is some idea as to the scope and of the projects on the list, so that we have some idea as to where and what you started with and the budget numbers in 2012 to what we're seeing today, and understand whether or not it's a project that was, well, a guess. We know we want to widen the road, but we don't have the details down. We think we can do it for this amount, or if it's a project that has quite a bit of detail, like we want to widen it to a divided 4-lane road with turn lanes at intersections. That gives us a feel for whether or not some of this is caused by scope creep, or whether some of it is legitimate because of cost increases for materials, labor, et cetera, or whether or not it is things that are not in control of the member governments, like EPA requirements or other federal requirements that may be levied on it because they're using federal money. But just some idea as to what the baseline was when we started in 2012 to compare it against what we're saying we need now.
Yeah, and I weighed that and kind of toyed with it. And I'll ask Rick and Bev and Mike, when the list was put together, and I know some people in here were part of the group that kind of worked on that, but do we have somewhere in the records some general descriptions of, or is it just a simple 1 or 2-liner? Do you recall?
I think basically they were like, replace such bridge over thing, and, and description meaning, bridge and any roadway improvements. But I think where we're short is we didn't really have a design to say, what does that really boil down to? How much effort is that to replace a bridge?
Right.
And with a bridge there, with those, and that's one of the reasons I want to get better handles on because we have a lot of bridge projects coming up. A lot of times you can scale back a roadway project. You can't build half a bridge or too narrow a bridge. That defeats the purpose. So we got to build the whole thing, but we need to know what's that really going to take.
So it may be hard to compare if the city goes through and updates their cost estimates, like Mike was talking about. They should be able to also provide a little bit more of a description versus just widen Woodman Road or replace bridge. And then when they come in with the project for requesting approval for funding, we can compare what changed from that, from this next update. Because they really haven't addressed the project list as a whole in any level of detail since it was put together, unless it was in this first year or so of execution. Am I correct in that?
I think we could provide maybe a better scope of what it's going to take. It may be hard to compare to what we put on originally, because it was very vague and broad. So at least I guess we could show why it's costing.
Right.
What is-
Does that
what's-
sound reasonable, Jim?
I think it does to a degree, but it just seems odd that we don't have a better idea as to what some of these projects should have entailed in 2012 when we ended up with one-liners. You have to have some idea as to what you're expecting to build or expecting to do in order to come up with some sort of budget estimate. Otherwise, you're just pulling it out of thin air and hoping it's right.
With regard to I guess I'm the only one left from when the Public Outreach Subcommittee started the reauthorization effort. Is there anybody else? Okay. Basically, what we did on that group was ask the member governments to formulate, similar to the way they did it in 2004, something that would fit on a ballot. And that's, so defending the one-liners to a certain extent. Now, I'm fairly certain, at least I'm hoping, that they have more of an idea than just that. If they don't, I think it's reasonable to get a little bit more detail. So I'm kind of with Gene of, okay, if we know that this is a project that has to be done, and we need to kind of get a little bit more of a handle on the scope, I think it would be a good idea to at least get that into the process now. And I don't think it's unreasonable to expect, I mean, in the military, and I know there's some folks in here who've done with military contracts, you know, they look way down the road, and yeah, they do end up having to revise numbers and revise things, but at least they have a ballpark idea 10 years down the road what's going on. I'm not looking to nitpick or overburden, but when we've got something that's as vague as widen Woodman Road, that is kind of, you know, we could have a project that's 10 million, or we could have a project that's 50 million. It just really depends on what the scoping is. And the scoping should fit the need, not just, you know, now, but in the future. So without being too overburdensome, I like where Jim is heading. I think it's reasonable. It's definitely, I mean, as Gene said, you know, 20% is I think a very reasonable threshold, and I don't think it'll overburden, because you have to kind of have an idea where you're headed anyway. I mean, especially when it comes to traffic.
Can I interject here real quick?
Yeah, sure.
So that I agree wholeheartedly with everything Brian just said. The only thing I would put out there is that 20%, if that's the average today, I just ran the numbers. That means that since 2012, we're looking at about an average of 4.5% inflation per year over the last 4 years. If that continues in 3 years, everybody's going to be over 40%, and we're going to have a lot of PowerPoint presentations.
Which is why I said, at least on the city side, I'd like to adjust numbers to what we think is more realistic, and then when we come to that actual budget year, we'll be closer, and then we'll see if we're, you know, around 20 or if it's 40.
Yeah, and that 20%, yeah, that 20% is rough, because we've seen some of the projects come in this year that are just, labor is high, and labor may be running 12 to 15%. Materials, in some cases, depending on what the materials are running 17, 18% or whatever. So I threw that 20 out there as just as a threshold, and we can change any of those. That's just fine. Rick, you had his hand up, Gene. I mean, John, we'll come back to you in just a second. Rick?
Regarding the request for more detail behind the one-liners, I did attend the CTAB meetings in 2011 and 12, and Kathleen did generate a spreadsheet that had more detail. So for at least the city projects, there is more detail. If you either want to continue talking while I go upstairs, check a file, and make 17 copies and bring it back downstairs, I can, or declare a 15-minute recess, I can run upstairs and have that for you. It may include all member governments projects, or it may just be the city projects. And I'm remembering that the detail might be a sentence or two.
I mean, will it help us with this discussion right now, or is it something we can provide at a later time? I think the purpose, in my mind, of this conversation was to try to establish some boundaries or some guidelines that could be passed out during the budget formulation phase, so that people knew the specifics of what change we can do in another meeting, I think.
Okay.
And I would certainly want, as Mike has provided city, I would certainly want county inputs on whether these threshold numbers are reasonable, whether this is asking too much. And, you know, again, we go back, we brought it back several times over the last several months of our role of trying to protect the reputation of RTA and perform our roles as citizen monitors and the stewards of the money. I don't think this is unreasonable, and so that's the reason I threw it out. The county, have you guys got any input on?
Dennis Barron. I'm filling in for Jennifer today. She wasn't able to make it. It's probably more appropriate for her to comment, but I'll comment anyway. I think the county, similar to what the city, has a little more than the one-liners, but not a whole lot more, because you're getting people that are identifying projects to be put on. Somebody's saying, okay, you got so many lane miles of road to do. In past projects, they've cost this much. You haven't looked into what the utilities that Mike mentioned involved, and a lot of times utilities drive both the constructability and a good portion of the cost. Similarly, property, the environmental stuff that Mike mentioned also. The going back and trying to scope the future projects to give you a baseline. It can be done, but it's I guess where you want to put the resource. Do you have the resources to do it? Okay. Speaking for the county, I'm not sure that we have available resources to start looking at projects down. We have projects that are budgeted for this year that people haven't been assigned to because we don't have the people to even take a look at those projects to get them started. And I probably shouldn't be saying this with Jennifer here. But,
no, Jennifer told me that
okay.
After our last meeting, that their staff was maxed out. And so that, having been on the receiving end of these kind of requests, I mean, having been staff putting stuff together like this, and then you have to ask yourself, what are you going to do with it when we get it? I mean, you know, we're not going to pay much attention to a project, the cost of a project 5 years in the future. I mean, let's be realistic. And so it's just a wasted effort on their part.
As a possible suggestion, I mean, until you actually start looking at the project in a little more detail, and maybe that's at the completion of the preliminary design stage, you have a fairly good idea what the scope is, what the estimate, what your environmental concerns are, what the utilities are. Maybe that is the time to present to the CAC and the board a detailed scope. This is what we're planning on building. This is what we think this is going to cost. This is what our budget is. So the budget doesn't support it, or it does support that. And at that time, you can make a decision that maybe there's scope in there that has been assumed and costed that you may want to consider for elimination, or if it's needed scope that needs to be done to make the project viable, then maybe you want to figure out where we get the money from.
And that preliminary design, is it 30%?
Yeah, I would say we do a preliminary design, we do a final design. I don't know whether you do. We do conceptual planning too at times, but again, you haven't looked at a whole lot of detail there, and there's a lot of contingency there. But at the preliminary design level, you should have a fairly good idea of what you're going to move forward with in design and what you're going to recommend.
That was part of the takeaway I took in talking to the two ladies after the last meeting. So is that preliminary design? Joan?
I really appreciate you doing this. I think that this is a good roadmap on how to handle these projects without being too onerous on the staff. And so I would just like to thank you for this, and I think it's a good plan.
Can I ask a question of you?
Sure.
Like, if we switched hats, do you think that there's anything that can sort of protect against the fear of scope creep? I mean, if you had to kind of allay fears or address this concern, what's an intermediate step?
I'm not sure. I mean, can you eliminate the politicians, the developers, and that's okay.
Hey, Dennis, get to the mic.
No, you didn't want to hear that.
Well, no,
Fair comment, because I mean, you're looking at it from an engineering perspective.
But at the time you do the preliminary design, you should have a fairly good analysis of the scope. You could decide at that point whether scope that we have identified as necessary for the project is necessary. Now, if scope creeps in after that, then I think you have, the points that you were making, Jim, before. It's appropriate to come back, but then you at least have a baseline of what you started with. And
And an example, a good example might be is a bridge that's currently planned to go over Fountain Creek may have to be redesigned once the EPA decides what they're going to do based on the flooding and the other stuff, and so that could drive a change. That may drive a change in scope, but it's driven from something outside a personal decision to make it gold-plated or do whatever, and so that's the kind of thing that the information that we need to answer to the other citizens of the county and that are part of this whole thing. Brian,
Yeah, I mean, historically speaking, we've been pretty good as a committee at identifying things that could be potential scope creep, like over landscaped things of that nature, versus something that, like what Jim mentions, Army Corps of Engineers requirements, federal requirements regarding railroads, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, those things are obviously something I think any reasonable person would agree, okay, well, we've got to deal with it, and it's probably going to cost more money. So, I mean, having a good idea at the start of, okay, this is kind of what we envision. We really, as a committee, haven't been overly restrictive or nitpicky about things like that. We have been nitpicky about things like, over landscaping a particular project to make it look pretty. And we do want projects to look pretty to a certain extent, but there's also a certain amount of, okay, functionality versus, okay, can this be done through other funding? Appropriateness of funding is one of those big things people always hear from me. And so I think going forward, if we have a good baseline understanding of the project that we're dealing with, things like engineering changes because of, they do potholing and they find that, the soils have changed, or there's a requirement from the Army Corps of Engineers or somebody else. I don't see that being an issue for us as a committee, because again, reasonable improvement stuff are usually acceptable.
well, this isn't necessarily in the form of, the next step would be to, if you guys are okay with these numbers.
No.
You're not?
No.
Okay.
I'd like to see them change to 15 and 30, quote,
What is it, Reb?
to 15 and 30.
So the
Project
inflation,
increase is 15%? Oh,
And,
I can explain the reason.
yeah.
go ahead, Reb, go ahead, and I'll jump in, go ahead.
Basically, Jim's using estimates, and having been in the construction industry a long time, I've seen so many ebbs and flows ups and downs, I'm not comfortable because the contractor will take advantage, the governing entities will take advantage and try and make sure everything's covered. I'd like to see something more than a conceptual thing, which I understand. There's statutorily, you can only have so many words on a ballot doing certain things, and we have certain individuals in this town that'll watch it like a hawk. Anyway, Joan's not going to understand anything about Joan being the general public. Okay?
Thank you.
She's not
The
going to
dunce cap
understand
on me.
widening Woodman Road, for
You
example.
can say me, that's fine.
It's very nebulous. Is it from 2 lanes to 3? Hell, she's never even been on Woodman Road. So, if she goes up there and sees a cow path, and now it's a paved road, granted, it's a county road, or country road type thing, and it's only, 60 feet wide with shoulders and everything. It's a heck of a difference between, so what was put on the ballot was put on basically for Joan knows where Woodman Road is, and I'm picking on Joan, she's here.
Yeah, you just wait. I will have my comebacks.
But seriously, so.
Why you
I'm
want to
around
lower it to
Italian.
15?
Conservatism.
Huh?
Conservatism.
Okay. So
You're saying labor was 12%?
I threw that number out just based on some rough math. Based on our discussion, we've already had, seeing price increases over this year that have come in.
So I would be,
The one that got me was 66%. That's the one that blew my mind.
Yeah, but labor in general has been running 12.
I'm not sure. The city, some of the projects we bid, the actual increase over our cost estimates has been running 20% this year. And this is after we finalized design, revised the estimate based on inflated prices from other projects, and we changed the estimate, and we still put out the bid, and it came in 20%. So it's not 4% over 4 years. It's this year we're seeing 20. Now, I'm hoping that's going to slow down. I think two things. One, like Dennis said, we could probably bring in a little bit more scope from these sheets that Rick mentioned. They're not going to be a whole lot more, but some will be able to say, hey, this was based on an engineering concept report. Others are going to say, this is as good as it gets. So you can kind of see kind of what the scope was initially. I think I like these numbers, especially, like I said, if we are able to come back and say, hey, listen, we want to adjust this project up to this so that when it comes on actual budget year, we can address these issues. Reb's numbers, I think, if you had as case in point, I just had a estimator come out to look at my roof, and he says it's cost this much to do a roof. He gave me a ballpark number of the range and what it typically costs. So I have a number, and if somebody comes in more than 15%, I can say, hey, that doesn't seem right. On a project that we don't know what it's going to really take, I think we try to tighten those limits. It's going to be tough because there are so many unknowns at this point to put like a 15 and 30% cap. I think it's a little bit too restrictive because we don't have a solid idea of what we're actually doing.
But what is the 15 or 30% cap? What is that on? First of all, we don't know. You decided you wanted to widen Woodman Road, okay? That's all it says on the thing. Granted, Rick has available, and I don't care about what it says right now. You had to have some idea when you asked for money after the project was originally conceived. You had to have some idea, for the sake of discussion, a 30% design range, that the project was going to cost this much on your knowledge now. You're saying you've seen 20% increases this year, but you're allowing up to a 40% jump?
Well, this is just on, like I said, some projects we had a pretty good idea what it was going to take. Others were very, very, very rough. And that's the ones that we're seeing these big jumps.
Just a minute, Gene was first.
Regarding Reb's comment about the numbers, I don't know whether 20 is appropriate or not, but just doing some looking, CDOT's Colorado Construction Cost Index, going back on a rolling four-quarter average, the last time it was below 20% was 2013 fourth quarter. It has been running 20 to 30% ever since on a rolling four-quarter average.
Okay.
on a quarter by quarter, from first quarter this year to second quarter this year, a 45% jump in construction costs.
In one quarter, in 90
In one quarter.
days.
For the year, they're running about 22%. I'm just putting that out as to give some idea, but I know that there's people here that have better ideas as to whether or not that construction cost index is either appropriate locally or whether it's even a decent yardstick to try to make a basis on.
Okay. Joan and then Carla?
I think Reb's numbers are a little too onerous. The 15%, I'm more comfortable with the 20 and 40, and yes, I have driven Woodman Road. However, I want us to have an overall good sense of what's going on, but I don't want it to be so detailed that we're tying the hands of the city or the county. There's that balance between oversight and being absolutely nitpicky for really no good reason. And so therefore, I'm more comfortable with these numbers.
Specifically to Jean's point, so at what part of the budget, this is kind of a twofold question, to what part of budget does this apply? And kind of on a minutia point, at what point do you take over the individual change order limitations that we've just increased? So, let me rephrase the question. At what part of the project would this come into play, and would that help drive at what part of the budget, where you are in your budget process?
This was all intended when they submit their budget, and then they come forward to us with approval, that final project, they're ready to let that contract, or they're coming to get approval to do how they come, sometimes phase one, preliminary design and the construction. We look at that total project number, and if that total project number that they're projecting at that point is greater than, and maybe the baseline will be this revised baseline that they submit, that we look at, but we would certainly look at what was forecasted in the budget, because if I understood.
The initial budget, okay, gotcha.
When they submit their 2017 year budget, if they don't really take a hard look at it until year of execution, they really won't look at it until they're into fiscal year 17. And so the comparison would be between those 2 points. If we look at it in the budget year, we've got to have a reasonable baseline of readjusted all the projects. If all the projects aren't adjusted, if everybody doesn't do that, we have 2 different baselines we're comparing to. So
Right, okay. So I think Jean used the word baseline initially as well. So that's helping. So then let me ask, so are you looking for a motion? Or do you want this to be more of a policy that we give back to the city and county as they really hone in for their budgets for the next fiscal year?
all right, I'm going to answer that question. Rick wants to say something, and Brian had something, and I'll come back to that.
I think I have 3 points. I'll try to remember the second and the third one. In August of 2012, when the board saw the final list of one-liners, they also saw the project estimates as of that date. Those are that's the baseline for all the 150 projects in the PPRTA 2 A and B. So just as Beverly had her rainbow spreadsheet for PPRTA 1, and the very first column on the left had the starting cost estimates on day one, as those cost estimates, and we're just talking about capital only, as those cost estimates increased over the years, either through across-the-board inflation or specific requests, as the project cost estimates increased, not budget, just project X started out on day one as 5 million. Then as the city or county did more work on it, got to some design, conceptual, 10%, 30%, whatever, then all of a sudden, their cost estimate for that project is 6 million. Okay, that's a 20% increase, 6 over 5. They still have to fit that into their population-based allocation.
Right.
that they get each year, but both in the original budget and when Bev has additional money, and she lets everybody know they have a little bit more capital maintenance and transit because there's more money in mid-year. So the question is, when Project X went from 5 million to 6 million in its project estimate, not budget, project estimate, how much detail do you want to see, or do you want to see, do you want to recommend to the board that they see if it's 10% over the day one estimate, and the day one for PPRTA 2 is August of 2012. So as county wants to wait and only look at those at budget year, Mike's offering to do better than that and look out further years. But whenever they bring that in, and Project X went from 5 million to 6 million, or 5 million to 7 million, or West Colorado, as I saw in the newspaper a week ago Monday, it is now 26 million, and the August of 2012 estimate for PPRTA 2 for that project, combined city, county, and Manitou, was 12 million. It's now 26 million. How much detail do you want to see depending on the percent increase? That's the only question. How much detail do you want to see? So set your 3 or 4 steps for percentages and then decide how much detail you want to see. That's the only question that's before you today is how much detail do you want to ask of the member governments depending on the percent increase of each capital project increase?
Brian had his hand up.
Something too, I wanted to come back and actually ask that folks reconsider REV's 15%. What Rick said is perfect reasoning why, but I heard the word cap mentioned. That's not a cap, it's a threshold.
Right.
And all we're doing is we're saying, once you cross this threshold, we would like some more explanation and information. Really, all we do is we vet the information, we decide, whether or not we think it's reasonable or not, and then we make our recommendations to the board based on the vetting and the information that we gather. They're elected officials, they've got a lot of different things they do. That's really what we do, is we provide the additional information and we go through vetting all this crud, so they don't have to waste the time doing it. So I'm actually more comfortable with REVs keeping in mind the downturn that we went through, where the inflationary pressures also took a big nosedive. As a matter of fact, we were actually getting some really good bids back then because people were desperate. Now, it's gravy train time, but our economy is cyclic. And we've already seen the last few months that we may be okay locally, but nationally there are some trends that are a little disturbing. And I just would rather have a little bit more better handle. That 5% difference may not seem like a lot, but when you're talking about millions of dollars, it can be.
Well, and keep in mind, they can always be adjusted as things change too. But anyway, let's try to wrap this up. Any other, Tony, did you have another?
Brian said exactly what I was going to say, almost word for word, so.
Okay. Cindy?
Okay, I'm going to go total reverse. Working for a local government, then I come in at 30% higher because of this and this and this, and I'm telling you everything. Is it this board's place to say, no, we don't agree with that, go back to the drawing board? But why? What are you going to do with all this information? I mean, information is good, you know more about the project, but is that going to change anything about I mean, I have concerns that we're getting more involved and we're trying to take control, not take control, but have more of a say in the actual project than we should.
Here,
And I know I'm in the minority.
no, I hope that what I'm hearing. It's hard to know, based on the descriptions that we have right now, what the original intent of the project was. But an example of where we need to be careful is statements that are incorporating stormwater outside the right-of-way of the road that's now going 800 feet or a quarter mile up the creek or down the creek, and they're charging it all to RTA. And that is not within the purview of the RTA money. So it's those kinds of things where instead of completing a bridge, you're also resurfacing another whole block of roadway, and that's beyond the bridge or preceding the bridge, that's not part of the bridge replacement, if you will. So it's just an understanding so that we, with our constituencies, can answer questions from the public, but it's also being a good steward of the money, just to make sure the environment, not that we would say, no, we don't believe that. We may, you know, we're not in the approval process. We can simply go to the board and state our concern about something, and then it's up to the board to make those decisions. But for me, it's about, if you've got a 40% increase in a project, I kind of want to know why. And if it's because when you start looking at their drawings and stuff, we're now doing stormwater that's a quarter mile either side of the bridge, that I think that exceeds the replacement of that bridge or culvert. That was kind of my purpose. So.
I think if just to tag on to that, I'm sorry, but we're basically raising the red flag. If we see something, and most of you who know me, I mean, I'm always, because I look at things from a very skeptical point of view. And if I see something that raises a red flag or raises a question, I'm going to ask, because that's something that either the general public needs to know, we need to know as a committee, or the board may need to know.
Okay, let's wrap this up. John?
Yeah, to wrap this up, are you looking for a motion on this?
Yeah, back to Carla's question. Yes. I would like to get approval in a form of a motion or a recommendation or something that I can take this to the board as some guidelines that can be included in going forward for the member governments, and that the board would approve or mind it or whatever, but I would like to have the groups of permission to present this to the board in the form of a recommendation.
Okay, in that case, then I would move
Jim?
acceptance of the level of detail as presented.
For the motion on it. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, Rev has a question.
Well, it's not a question, it's a comment.
Haven't gone to a second.
When the 2012 projects were put forth, they had a conceptual budget. That conceptual budget was literally for each of the projects, and it determined what projects could be put on the ballot. It was also on the basis that those projects would be done in 7.5 years. With PPRTA 1, we had to downsize Marks Shuffle South, but it was coincidental with a change in traffic patterns and things like that. There was also some information that was not known about right-of-way, which is another big unknown. Property values are a lot more stable, but we actually went through condemnation with one parcel of property. So literally, this is an advantage to the board as well to help guide them in terms of, we aren't going to finish capital list A on PPRTA 2. At the current rate, there's no way we can get all 150 projects done. And we're struggling right now. Literally, one of the projects was downsized on PPRTA 1, which is Mark Sheffel North. I never realized that it went past Woodman. And I'm sorry, that's quote scope. And so part of my concern with literally the 15 and 30, I'm not advocating that. That's not my point. The point is to literally think in terms of 150 projects as well and give the board as much time as possible.
All right, just 1 second. We have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Tony? Tony and Joan. Joan, and then Tony. You had a...
I just wanted to comment on the Mark Shuffle North. Yes, we had we didn't have enough money to complete it up to Woodman, but when it was put in the program originally, I think there was also an assumption there would be a tremendous developer contribution by the Banning Lewis development on the other side to pay half of the cost of the road. That didn't materialize, so you didn't have that money to fund the project.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that.
Sensitive, I was the project manager.
Okay, so we have a motion, on the floor and a second with, you guys giving me the permission to take this to the board in the form of a recommendation from the CAC. So that's what I, as a recommendation that they adopt, the guidance, that they decide as guidance. So, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay. David, you're opposed? Okay.
Can I abstain?
You can abstain if you want. Any abstentions?
One abstention.
David? David, opposed, Reb? Okay? All right. Thank you for your indulgence. Next item, capital maintenance public transportation contract, City Car Wash Springs.
Mike Chavez, City Engineering. We've got several contracts. I'm going to talk about the first two, and then Corey will address the others. So we have a change order to AECom for $85,000, and that's to do some final design on water line that CSU is going to be replacing in that project. This will be reimbursed by CSU as part of their project costs, but we'll upfront the money through RTA. Next is a construction contract to make some modifications to the intersection of Fontanero and El Paso. We had even Pricer come in a low bid at $477,000, and they came in below our estimate. So we did have a project that came in below, so we're happy about that.
Always a good thing. I have a couple of questions. On the first one, on your fact sheet, this sheet, Mike, on this sheet, I'm sorry, on the first project, it says that change order 1 was for preliminary design, final design, and construction documents for the replacement of utilities.
So when we awarded the project, it was for a preliminary design of the roadway. Then CSU came in and wanted to replace water lines because it's 100 years old. So change order 1 was for the preliminary design of the water line. Change order 1 will be reimbursed by CSU. Change order 2 was for the final design of the roadway. And change order 3, the roadway. And 3 is for the final design of the water line.
The water line, okay, all right. Thank you for clarifying it. On the second project, Fontanero and El Paso, you make a statement that is removing the 5th leg of the intersection. What's the 5th leg of the intersection?
This is where Fontanero and El Paso and Paseo come in. And so we are actually going to remove the eastern leg of Fontanero from connecting to the intersection. We're going to basically cul-de-sac it off. And so there's not much traffic on that leg, so the neighborhood's good with it, but that helps just with the signal timing because there's one less leg that you have to do a signal progression for.
I was at the wrong intersection. Okay, all right, I understand now. So the 16 budget, that's $16 million at the bottom of that. That's all of your maintenance for the kids. Is that right?
Yeah, that's the whole.
Okay, that's all the questions I have. Any questions on those two? We'll vote on them all as a packet. Unless Corey wants to throw some eggs on the table.
No eggs, no eggs. Please don't throw them at me. Corey Farkas, Public Works Operations and Maintenance, City of Colorado Springs. We're bringing forward a couple of contracts today. I came before this group a while back. We talked about a paint truck and the need for that, and possibly some additional equipment as well. It took a while, but we got our pricing back on the paint trucks, and I want to move forward with awarding a contract and purchasing it. Initially, we were estimating about $500,000 for that paint truck. It actually came in at just over $450,000, which was good with everything that we needed on our specification. The other pieces of equipment that we're bringing forward today are pothole trucks. We're in need of pothole trucks. We've got a total of 8 for our city and for our PPRTA pothole trucks. Our average age in years of our pothole trucks is 14 years, and we have about a 66% up rate on our pothole trucks. And with a 66% up rate of those trucks being on the road, we've actually increased our production 3 times over the last 2 years. So we hit a record of 62,000 potholes last year. We're on course to match or beat that this year. But again, I think our biggest nemesis in helping to control our potholes is our trucks being in the shop. So with some money that we've been able to scrounge together in our maintenance fund, specifically our slag operation going down, only halfway through supplying us our slag rock this year, we were able to pull some of that money together to purchase 4 new pothole trucks. So that's the second one. One note, I believe your sheet says $1,030,000 on the pothole trucks, for the 4 pothole trucks. There's an update to that. It's actually $1,015,480. Talking to Mike from procurement just prior to the meeting, the company called us back and was able to knock almost $15,000 off of the original price for those. And then the third one is an on-call contract for rental equipment. So a lot of the equipment that we utilize in our operations is rental equipment. We rent quite a bit, and I know we've had some conversations on whether we should rent or purchase equipment, but with the amount that we're actually out there doing in the right-of-way and the extreme cost of a lot of the equipment, I think a healthy mix of getting some new equipment and continuing to rent other pieces of equipment that are more seasonal, if you will, makes sense. So at this point in time, the one thing, again, that is a hurdle for us to jump over is getting equipment in a timely manner. And so by setting up an on-call contract with these 3 different vendors, Four Rivers Equipment, Power Equipment Company, and United Rentals, our hope is that we'll be able to have quick access to our equipment as quickly as we need it. The beautiful thing about this is we've actually locked them into pricing for 5 years. So over the next 5-year period, our rental equipment costs will not increase. So, yes?
On the pothole patch truck, is that 1 or is that 4?
Right.
That's 4.
Okay, because
It says
singular.
8.
Yeah. It says 4 each up in the description of the project.
Yeah, pothole patch truck 4 each. So yeah, we would be getting four new trucks.
It also mentioned something about a cost share with the concrete program on all 3 of these. The equipment rental, under the financial information tab, part of it. Under budget category 2016 RTA cost share concrete program.
Help me out here, Mike.
Corey, right here. On the financial, under the financial.
I'm hearing from Mike that it's a typo.
All right.
Where is it?
Y'all know what's coming. We're talking about buying trucks. Now, I
What does it say
understand
for?
these may be
I heard it say it.
somewhat specialized.
I'm blind.
Not somewhat specialized, very
I'll leave
specialized.
that to Corey to explain how specialized so that we can, because in the past, we have purchased specialized equipment, so I'm willing to consider that. One of the things that and it was interesting that Jim mentioned it, is I saw the cost share program. Can I ask why these funds are not being looked at from the 2C program?
We cannot purchase equipment with 2C funds.
Well, technically speaking, you're not supposed to be doing that here either.
Well, it was vetted through this group as well as the board that we could purchase specialized equipment with PPRTA. Specialized equipment.
On a per equipment basis, we have allowed that in the past.
Okay, so right off the bat, I can tell you need a CDL driver's license to operate any of these trucks.
Okay.
So for the pothole trucks specifically, it's got an air compressor for the pneumatic hammer that's on it, a spoils bin for all the asphalt that you're taking out. It's got a heated hopper so that it keeps asphalt hot and at temperature throughout the entire day, and a conveyor belt system built into that hopper that helps the material get out of the hopper and into the hole.
Who's responsible for the insurance on these vehicles?
Insurance on that, I believe it's the city. I know the city does all of the maintenance.
They're self-insured through the city.
Thank you.
Because we had some problems with that in the past as well.
They stopped doing that. They stopped getting extra insurance because they were self-insured anyway, so it's okay.
And all the maintenance is taken care of by the city.
All right, so just let me throw this out here. The board has, on more than one occasion, approved the purchase of specialized equipment. And this is specialized equipment. It's not general use pickup trucks and that kind of thing. The board has supported that on numerous occasions for the new members. And so I really don't see that in these two pieces of equipment as a point to discuss, other than just making the point so that everybody knows. But this would, in my opinion, fall into specialized in the basis of the conversation we've had in the past about pickup trucks and that kind of stuff. So just to be clear.
I have a motion.
And Corey's explanation was sufficient.
Okay? So any other discussion about the city's contracts? David?
From your earlier motion or carry forward to the board as far as the percentage level on your budgets, to try to keep companion projects out of PPRTA funding and so forth. And forecasting and budgeting is kind of rough, especially if you're trying to do snowplow removal. I don't know what the weather's going to do. But on some of these rental ones, excuse me, on the rental ones, the verbiage that's in it, I don't agree with, because it has companion drainage project. To me, that means it's trying to slide in stormwater.
Companion drainage is actually one of our PPRTA line items. It's a CIP line item for us. It's companion drainage. We get about $400,000 and $412,000 or so, I believe, in CIP money for companion drainage. So it's
On 3, 4, and 5, it's as well as companion drainage projects throughout the city. And I know that's what Jim is trying to avoid on the construction.
Good catch, as long as it's in the right.
Well, companion drainage is, didn't we have this discussion about companion drainage is that incidental to the right-of-way and of the project, is companion drainage versus stormwater,
Correct.
stormwater drain. Companion was that stuff that's
underneath the road.
incidental, underneath the road and leading directly up to the road, not 800 feet up the creek.
Correct.
Definitely part of roadway maintenance.
Okay, Joan and then Jean.
I'd like to move that we bifurcate the list between engineering and streets.
Is there a reason?
Yeah.
I'm not comfortable with some of the things on the street side, and yet I'm perfectly fine with the engineering pieces.
Do you want to
Expand on
Yeah, I mean, You want to discuss some of the things you're not comfortable with?
I still have a bit of a problem, and I know they're specialized in purchasing trucks. I'm just not real comfortable with that piece.
Policy's already been set by the board.
Yeah.
And that's part of my concern.
The policy's been set by the board. We can still, as individuals, be uncomfortable. But I'm not sure what we would accomplish by separating it out and then you just voting no on the equipment. I mean, on the equipment purchase itself. And you can still vote the way you want to vote. I'm not trying to tell you how to vote, but I just don't see what's going to be accomplished by separating them out.
For me, the conflict then is if I have to vote this all as one package, then I would be voting no.
Policy number 24, approved by the board regarding vehicles that they approved September 10 of 2014. It's an 8-part, and I can go make copies for you, but the 8-liner. Line 3 is continue the practice of purchasing specialized vehicles and equipment.
We went round and
And there was a definition of vehicles as well.
And there was a list provided by Kathleen and photographs of all of the specialized equipment, so.
It's good, though, for the new members to.
Well, yet I find it interesting that, I know the city brings these forth, yet I find it interesting the county has never come to us for the purchase of specialized vehicles that I'm aware of.
That's true.
So I'm not getting it.
It's a choice. It is a choice.
Okay, Gene?
Are any of these vehicles that are on this list replacements for vehicles the city currently has in use?
What I would like to see is to add these vehicles to the fleet. We have 8 trucks currently. All of them are in poor shape. So to keep 8 on the road as much as possible, I would like to have 4 new on the road, 4 old on the road, and as an old one goes down, have a backup to be able to put on the road to continue operations.
All right. That being said, you only are accounting for 8 trucks. Because you have 4 now, you want to get
Oh, he has 8 now.
Yes, 8.
8 now? Okay.
Yeah, I have 8 at the
My
moment.
misunderstanding. Who paid for the original 8 trucks that you have? Was that PPRTA funds or was that city funds?
4 of them are city funds, 4 of them are PPRTA.
All right. On the airless paint machine, is that a replacement for an existing paint machine, or is that in addition to existing painting machines the city has?
Well, again, that painting machine is in the shop quite often. My preference, and I don't know that I'll get this, but my preference would be that I would keep the old machine just in case the new one were to go down in the shop. We could continue operations. I don't know that Fleet will allow me to keep it. Because we do pay for all of the maintenance, but that's what my preference would be. And that is a city-owned paint truck, the original.
Okay, the original is city-owned, and you're asking for PPRTA money to replace it.
That's correct, because that, for the last, 11, 12 years, that city piece of equipment has been working solely on PPRTA projects.
Gray matter dies quickly at my age, but I think there were a series of vehicles that the city had when RTA 1 was passed, and that was one of the legacy equipment that was being used once RTA passed and started working, if I remember correctly.
Will any of these vehicles be used on non-PPRTA projects?
They'll be used on roadway projects in the right-of-way.
Part of the maintenance program is would be potholing, would be part of the maintenance program.
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Amy, do you have a question?
Those are wonderful questions. Because I feel like replacement is one thing of vehicles, but you're adding 50% to the fleet. And I think there's been an increase in the number of potholes that we're filling. And city projects, yes, and PPRTA projects, so it sounds like those vehicles would be used for other city projects. I feel like it's another slippery slope and
Thank you.
language issue, for one. And for two, to Joan's point, I think even if we come up with a vote that decides ultimately that we approve these things, I think that we should be given the opportunity to express an opinion regarding the purchase of vehicles, even if it's 8-4 or 10-1. I like that opportunity, even if the policy is, as we agreed, is well established. But again, I think Jean has asked some beautiful questions.
Brian?
Concern is that I have seen PPRTA vehicles in Pueblo West. And I always sort of wonder what they're doing down there, because nothing in Pueblo County depends PPRTA.
Probably pickup trucks?
Pickup trucks primarily.
Yeah. That, and not to beat a dead horse for the folks who have been here forever, that was one of the things that we raised year after year after year since they were bought. There was a lot of things that should not have happened that did. We've kind of, the policy that we developed in 2014 kind of works to resolve that. And the reasonable thing, getting back to the subject at hand, I like Joan's idea about bifurcating because it does allow people like Amy and Joan, possibly myself, to express discomfort with the process. I don't have a problem with purchasing. We purchased a piece of equipment a few years ago for striping and roadway markings, and I'm trying to remember the difference between this that's being proposed and that. I believe it was a heat application.
Correct. That's the machine that goes and puts the arrows on the ground and school legends and things of that nature.
Okay.
That's the epoxy machine.
Right.
This is the paint machine.
Okay, and this is paint. As far as replacement of existing specialized PPRTA vehicles, like you said, there's 4 trucks that are coming towards the end of their life that are owned by or were purchased with PPRTA funds. I don't have that much of a heartburn with replacing because it's already been done. As long as there is a serious cost benefit, in other words, because they're specialized, they tend to take a lot of maintenance. If they're down 60% of the time, it's affecting the ability to deal with the street issues that we have. So I'm okay from that regard. My concern is that from my understanding, 2C explicitly prevents this kind of a thing. Why are we not looking at general fund dollars for this then? For the purchase of these, is there a reasoning?
We don't have any general fund dollars to my knowledge for replacement at this point in time. But that's
when your other trucks go down that were not replacement PPRTA,
it's
pretty much out of luck.
It's a fight. It's a constant fight for us. Yes.
In my entire tenure on here, one of the things that I've always been and Amy mentioned it, is the slippery slope that whenever the city runs into an issue, they come to us to try and get money. Either that could be reasonably appropriate, and in many cases is not reasonably appropriate. I just hate to see us get into this where, I mean, let's go 10 years down the road. Let's say the RTA goes away. The city is going to be in deep doo-doo. So the concern I have is, why are there not other avenues being explored? Why are they just coming right
I don't want to say they're not being explored, but that's a fleet, issue there. Ryan Trujillo, who's the contract manager for Serco, and yep, they're exploring other things. But me, I'm tasked with maintaining our infrastructure, and I can't do that right now. So.
All right, let's, one more comment, and then we're gonna move on.
As Brian's referring to this years ago, Fleet came in and told us that the average cost of a new vehicle maintenance was about 50 cents a mile, and we were paying like $4.80 a mile for these old vehicles to keep them on the road.
Wow.
Welding whole new frames in pickup trucks, or in dump trucks and things like this. And somebody came up with a lease to purchase deal back then, years ago, to get us away from these old vehicles. And we heralded that as a,
Green Mountain Falls did the same thing.
wow, that was wonderful.
They did a lease.
But these old vehicles are a disaster.
It was.
All right, I've heard several people voice concern about splitting the project. So I'll hear a motion to bifurcate the city's contract list.
Can I ask a question first?
Yeah, sure.
I don't know if it's to you or to Corey, but I think in the past when we're discussing the paint striping vehicle, that it could be utilized on county or whatever projects.
Yeah, so any specialized piece of equipment that we purchase with PPRTA funds can be utilized with any of the member governments. So if the county needed striping done, or
It kind of makes sense to not have it in your general fund versus here if it's being utilized by everyone with it.
And I think the caveat was because of liability versus you also had to provide the operator.
that is correct, we would provide the operators, and we have done that with the epoxy truck.
Before they bifurcate, could I ask something? Does everybody understand that maintenance, we don't, quote, have any control. They get a percentage, and basically striping and potholes are maintenance. They are not a capital thing. So, you know, if they want, whatever they call it, they use it out of their maintenance funds so they can do maintenance.
Yep.
And they're basically just telling us how. And part of that agreement was because the liability was discussed at considerable length with a paint truck, and I don't know where the county's ever going to, I mean, the county's never going to want to put up some of the epoxy paint.
Okay, let's hear a call to question on the bifurcation issue.
I move do we have a motion that I move for bifurcation? Okay.
But it was never second.
Bifurcating what?
Bifurcating engineering requests from streets requests.
Engineering is nowhere on the, what do you?
It is on division. The division column says streets and engineering.
So you want to leave the rental?
Those are under
So you want
streets.
the
Okay.
items number 1 and 2 to be separate from 3 through 7.
Correct.
And it was, who seconded?
Do we have a second for that motion? Ed, Gene on second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
Aye. Nay.
Raise hands on the four, please.
Three, four.
David?
5. Am I counting 5? 5 in favor of the bifurcate. Is that 6?
No, 5.
Okay, 5 people.
Okay, all those in the other way around?
It fails.
Okay.
5 to 7.
All right. I will, let's call the motion, then I'll make a comment. So that fails, so
Move for approval of the of the entire project list.
cities list. So we have a move to approve. A second from Tom. All those in favor?
One other,
Discussion.
One other point of discussion, just for the new members, for historical perspective. One of the big, and Red was very good to point out, this is a maintenance issue. One of the big issues we had in the past was using capital funds for this kind of a thing. So
It specifically says maintenance.
Just
though.
because they have the money
important
doesn't
for
mean they
everybody to
can waste
understand
it.
that these are two different pots.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor to approve the city's request or contract. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? No? Okay. For the sake of those that were concerned about the vehicle thing, I will make sure to include the concerns of the 5 members to the board about the uneasiness of purchasing vehicles. Will that be satisfactory?
Yes, thank you.
That would be very nice, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cory.
Okay, maintenance contracts for the county.
Capital contract.
Jennifer Irvin. We don't have any maintenance contracts. There's
Capital contracts.
both capital projects.
Capital maintenance, yeah, yep.
Okay, all right. We have two items, and Rick should have handed out a revised package for you. We had it one recently. We have two items. One's a construction change order to contract with Wildcat Construction on the Mark Shuffle Road South project related to additional movement of earth that was required. We found that there was an error in our original quantities, about 25,000 cubic yards. Confirmed that error and created a change order to compensate the contractor for moving the additional dirt. It is 1% of the contract amount, yes. Thank you for your kind words.
Yeah, holy cow.
All right.
The second item is a design contract amendment for HDR Engineering for our Highway 105 project. It includes additional funds that we needed to do preliminary design, plus final design for the federally funded portion, what we're calling Project A, which is the portion between Woodmore Drive and Lake Woodmore Drive. A couple of years ago, we were successful in getting that added to the STIP, and we finally got the IGA executed, and so now we're able to move into final design for that, and there's a federal-local agency split.
Dennis, does that complete 105 now?
The first item, it includes the preliminary design. It won't complete. The current project budget that we were talking about before, I think there's PPRTA funds of somewhere in the order of $18 million for that project.
Isn't this Highway 105?
Highway
Never mind.
105.
I'm sorry. I'm
Yeah.
too far north.
What we are completing, so we're doing the preliminary design for the whole corridor, and we had to break out the part that's federally funded because we didn't want to encumber the whole project with the federal requirements and all the environmental clearance requirements. So we do a final design on that one, which is we're getting federal funds for.
And they were letting you do it, which is, yeah, like Cindy said, that's great.
Yeah.
Move approved.
Okay. You want to say that louder?
Move approval.
Second.
Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. All right, member governments, other reports.
I think there was a 6C, is that correct? On there?
Oh, yes.
I'm
yes.
pulling that off. I learned about that this morning, so,
Are you removing it?
yes.
Oh, okay.
Could we ask
Well,
why?
that'll save us some time.
My operations manager put that in, and like I said, I found out this morning, I was like, no, absolutely not. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
We won't be here till midnight. Yeehaw.
Tell Jack that it spurred some conversation, and we appreciated the mental stimulation.
There you go.
How many
Now,
hours were spent on the discussion? $1,200 worth?
I actually appreciated Tom went through and laid out everything and was thinking in very concise fashion.
Yep,
So
I agree.
that was wonderful.
All right.
I agree.
All right. Okay, 6D's been full. Member governments, Colorado Springs request for revised board policy number 12.
Mike Chavez, City Engineering. So we're requesting on the Centennial reconstruction that we added to the Policy 12 exemption. So that basically changes and raises the change order limits. We've done this on our larger projects where basically the RTA policy is once we hit $100,000 in change orders, we have to come to the board for every change order. And we found on these large projects that you can get to $100,000 pretty easy. And especially with the reconstruction where we may find a spot of bad soil. We don't want to have to wait. If we hit the wrong timing, we technically could have to wait 3 weeks to get approval to issue that change order, and we don't want to do that for delay claims and just more.
Contract amount.
8.
It wasn't on, you're asking for it, but you just said that you have a final price, but what is
What was it? It was 7.9. You approved last month. We usually do them together, and. Let me see it. I think it's in the minute. I forget what was it last sentence. It was 7.9.
I thought it was 8.9.
Uh-huh.
Okay, for the new members' benefit, this list, as Mike suggested, when he reaches certain on the larger, more expensive projects, we provided exemption to policy. And so you'll see, we decided to keep the older projects on here for historical purposes and record keeping. So this, you can see the list of projects. So this project would be added to the active projects list in the top part of that policy. I guess we need to do a recommendation on this one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So do I hear, Joan?
I move recommendation as presented.
Second.
Tom, second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Where'd he go?
Did Brian leave?
I saw him just a few minutes ago.
He was just on his phone, walked out, and he's right there.
Brian, you're up, Doug.
Believe it or not.
Thanks for being patient.
Oh, Brian.
Brian was on the phone going, I'll be back a little later.
Is it on a case-by-case basis?
Say again?
Is there a definition of the projects, or is it case-by-case?
7.9?
I don't know the answer to that question. Rick, did we have a threshold of large, what defines a large project? No? Okay.
Just vague memory, past practice, that it's usually over 5, 6, 7 million.
Absolutely. Just, yeah. Okay.
Welcome.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon, Brian Vituli, City of Colorado Springs, Mountain Metro Transit.
So you can do work while you're...
Yeah. I just wanted to present our monthly transit report. For our local fixed route services, we had a slight increase, less than 1%, July of this year as compared to July of 2015. For our ADA paratransit services, there was about an 11% decrease in ridership from this July as compared to July of 2015. And our Metro Rides van pool service saw a large 36% decrease over that same time period. And I think at least the last couple of months I've been reporting, it could be a number of things. Low fuel prices. There's been some employee turnover and shift changes with some of the people that have been part of those van pools. It's the summer season. The weather's really good. There's less drive to get out of their own vehicles. And, I'll be interested to see. There's usually an uptick as the colder weather comes and bad driving weather increases. And good news, we're pursuing, we have leads on about 2 to 3 new van pools starting, and one of those is for our Peterson to Schriever Air Force Base service. So that's, there is a need out there. In the past, we've seen a lot of interest in having transit service, fixed route transit service to the military installations. Doesn't really pan out. Ridership is always very poor, and we've been saying for the last year or two that van pool services seem to be the best fit, and hopefully this will be one success story that will lead to others. And the paratransit decrease, this is we're constantly screening our riders to see if they are capable to use our fixed route services. So actually a decrease in ADA ridership is not a bad thing. It's a more expensive service to provide as compared to fixed route services, so that's, right, exactly.
Brian, I got, before you go into the next project, on your local fixed route stuff, that's an uptick for sure, particularly in Saturday and Sunday services. My guess is that's a direct result of your route changes and stuff you've done over the last year.
Availability.
I think there's some of that, but there was also, I think, one less Saturday and one less Sunday in July of 2015. So there's a little bit of a difference there. But I'd like to think that more weekend service is contributing to that.
Okay.
So. Yeah. And a project update, the downtown transit station relocation study is continuing. We're looking for this to be finalized sometime next month. The stakeholder working advisory group and the technical advisory group have met 2 times already each, and we've had 1 public open house. Right now, the consultant team, they started with a list of about 29 potential sites through the level 1 screening, which then ended up with about 12 going on to the level 2 screening. Right now, the team is finalizing the level 2 screening, ending up probably with about 5 sites, and we're starting to have some discussions with the owners of those 5 sites to see if there's even any interest or any obstacles. If there's no interest in them turning their property over for something like this, we would go to another site. But it's looking good for at least 5 sites to go on to the level 3 screening, which is a more detailed analysis, some cost analysis, and some drawings to show what a potential transit station could look like. And we plan on having 2 more tag and swag meetings this month and next month, and then 1 final open house in October. The project website link is on that memo. So if you're interested to hear more of what's going on with that, please visit. And I'll be back next month with an update on that. Are there any questions?
I just comment on the swag. You remember I representing this group on that thing, and I'm very impressed with the project team and the level of detail that the analysis and the work that they're doing. And so kudos to choosing a good team.
It's good. Good. Thank you.
Any other questions for Brian? All right.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Quarterly report from member governments. We didn't have anything in our packet. You got secrets you want to share?
You do.
You do?
Did you want to look at yours?
Big, long report.
Oh, from member, I get the quarterly report.
30-some.
Yeah. Say, this looks pretty big to me.
5 years old.
All right, go ahead.
Seen this thing's big.
Information item, I'll try to tackle any questions you might have.
Right.
What's road base, or road grade base, rather than road base? Green Mountain Falls.
Green Mountain Falls,
Oh,
I'm just curious, I've never seen that term.
it was just Phil, they just lined item that much.
Road grade
That's what it
base.
said.
Graded the road and laid some base.
Actually, it was the base material, it's considered road grade,
Road grade level.
Oh, road grade level base, okay.
so. It's just the term they used for the fill
It's-
material they brought in.
It's grade 5 then, not grade 6.
Yes.
Green Mountain Falls raises a good question. Have they replaced their folk up there yet?
No,
Okay, so it's.
the offers are out right now.
Okay.
I would like to commend Ramus, there's concise, very,
I tried myself on my concise.
And I can tell you had to stay up all night to think about how to word this.
Rick reminded me and I wrote it.
Concisely.
Any comments on the brunch for the new guys? This is a great report. You get an update on all the projects and current status. There's a lot of really good details here.
Yes, I said earlier I'd get back with you on the roadway safety, and I still will, but as I was looking at it, I realized that part of that, there are several signals here that were recently just installed on Academy, also on Fillmore and Nevada. So those are pretty costly, so we'll probably be seeing bills, and it'll get that balance down.
Just finished, or in the process of finishing the ones at Austin Bluff.
I think Flint Ridge, or I went one Sunday night and they had several intersections. So that money is getting spent. It just you haven't seen the bills. But I'll get a more detailed.
Item 8A, report of recent board actions. Any questions or comments on anybody on that?
Actually, just one question. The litigation was removed from the agenda. Was there a reasoning?
Which brings us to,
That's the
which
sixth.
brings us to item 10 in just a minute. Agenda topics for next meeting. Anybody have anything in burning desire to discuss? Okay. We'll go with the normal agenda. Item 10.
Item 10, regarding the Walmart lawsuit. The court date set 5 or 6 months ago was to be this Friday, the 9th. And the judge canceled that and said he would make a decision based on what's been submitted so far, but did not give a deadline for his decision.
Funny thing about that.
The judge not putting a deadline on themselves.
Is he running for re-election?
I don't know. The higher courts have set a goal for the lower court judges to decide cases within a year, and I think that's the end of the month for us, would be a year. So that's his goal. So,
That's like intent, right?
yes, it is.
So
It
as
is.
of today, we're still collecting there?
Yes, yeah. So we're not in a hurry to hear a no.
Oh, exactly.
Is there an expectation that we're going to hear a no?
No.
So are Jim and Rick okay? Did they just leave because they got term limited?
Yes.
Is Rick okay health-wise?
Hoover, yes.
Okay, all right.
As they were term limited on the CTAB,
Okay.
so therefore, because CTAB appointed them here,
Oh, I see.
so they're fine, just they were term limited.
Gosh, they've been on forever.
Yeah, it was great. We presented some thoughts to them, so.
I don't know if Rick is applied for this.
Yeah,
I've done that a
the,
few times myself, just kind of.
I don't know this.
yeah,
This is such
and
an
we also-
exciting-
We left open, there's some at-large positions that maybe. It was really neat to see Rick's wife there too. He was unable to attend, but his wife came and
He asked me if it helped out, and I said, yeah.
shared his comments.
Hey,
All right, anything else? Dave, you got anything? Adjourned. Thank you for your time today.
Talk to me about this.
He's a very good guy. I like that.
I'm reading this year-to-date actual expenses.